I'm going to call this a special meeting of the Pasadena Area Community College District Board to order, and this special meeting is being held at 4 p.m., starting officially at 4:06 p.m. I'm going to call this a special meeting Wednesday, May 2020. We had just had some feedback there. We okay?
Now you are.
Okay.
Yes, good.
And we will start off the meeting with the roll call, please.
Certainly. Trustee Osterling.
Here.
Trustee Chin Lau.
Here.
Trustee Fellow.
Here.
Trustee Wah.
Here.
Trustee Martin. You're muted.
Here.
Well, we know he's there.
I see him.
John.
There he goes.
Yeah.
You're unmuted now. Trustee Brown. There is a phone caller. I'm going to unmute that phone caller right now. Caller, you're unmuted.
This is Trustee Brown.
Great. And Trustee Silver? Absent. 6 out of 7, Mr. President.
Okay, and let's go ahead and do the pledge to the flag. And because he's not going to get much screen time today, I thought we'd have Dr. Bush lead us in the pledge.
All right, everybody stand up.
Ready, begin. I pledge
I
allegiance
pledge allegiance
To the
to
flag.
the flag of the United
States of America,
America,
and to the republic for which it stands,
for which it stands,
one nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Bush. And we have one agenda item today. Is that correct, Superintendent Androgianis?
That is correct. The purpose
Okay.
of today's meeting
Agenda item.
is for you all to have a presentation and an in-depth discussion about the facilities master plan in anticipation and in preparation for you to take formal action on that plan at your May 20th board meeting next Wednesday.
Okay, thank you. And for the record, Trustee Silver has also joined us, and we'll add her to the roll call. Okay, so what we're going to do here, again, thank you, Dr. Androgianis. This is our study session for the FMP, the Facilities Master Plan. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Bush. Hold on, I see a hand raised. Alex.
Before you do, Mr. President, I do have one item of public comment. Would you like to take that now or at another time?
I think now would be the appropriate time, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, let's go with public comment. Thank you.
Okay. This is public comment from Desiree Hernandez, who leads our Quest Center at PCC. It reads, on behalf of the Quest Center coordinator, Desiree Hernandez, the Supreme Court is expected to make a decision on DACA any day now, before the end of June. This is an uncertain time for many of our undocumented students, and it is extremely important that our students feel supported during this time, as we had many undocumented students drop out of school when DACA was rescinded in 2017. The Quest Center will be hosting a virtual town hall within 48 hours after the decision is made, where immigration attorney David Lawler will be providing in-depth clarity on the decision and answer any questions that our community may have. We welcome PCC leaders, staff, faculty, and students to join in solidarity. Please subscribe to Quest's YouTube channel, which is under PCC Quest, where the live town hall will take place. Whatever the outcome, Quest is here to support. Dream, come, do.
Okay, Mr. Buckelheit, thank you for sharing that public comment. And if I could ask you to forward that link to the trustees and others in the PCC community that would be interested to attend that.
Certainly will. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, and without further ado, we'll turn this over to Dr. Mike Bush.
Take it away.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Osterling. I'm going to share my screen, and I have to confess I'm lousy at Zoom, and I also get wrapped up into the presentation, but feel free to interrupt me with questions. Plus we have a couple, Alex had me insert some pause screens because I get too wrapped up that actually remind me to take questions. So, but please just interrupt and we'll get through this. Okay. Okay, I did that part so far.
Yay! Yay, Mike.
Yeah, lucky me. Okay. So this is pretty much the same as the presentation. Let's see, I can't make it go. How come? I guess I'm not that good. Let me try it again. See if I can make this one work. There we go. Everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay. So today we're going to review the facility master plan. It's pretty much the same presentation as the town hall, although I received some constructive feedback on that presentation and made a couple modifications on this. Then I want to review the cost and funding of the plan in broad sweeps. And then I want to talk about bridge financing of the Serafian building. So as you know, the scope of the facilities master plan was to assess our current facilities, update enrollment projections, focus on career communities. That's how our college has implemented guided pathways. And the time frame was from October 2019 through February 2020. We had over 60 participants across the campus working on the plan and giving input. And we also had our consultants at HGA had about 15 people assisting us. The deliverables are to outline the current state, which is in the document, the guiding principles plus the data that was used, and then make a recommendation to a future state of 3 campuses, or actually 4, the Colorado campus, Foothill campus, Rosemead, and PCC Northwest. The plan could be, is on our website at the FMP, and there's hard copies in our library when it opens again. Okay. To assess the current state, we looked at enrollment growth, and it's a modest enrollment growth, and it's not aspirational. We looked at the career communities, how they're currently laid out on the campus, looked at existing facilities, existing outdoor space, infrastructure, which is most of it's buried and we don't see, except for Mr. Osterling, who went in the tunnel. So he's actually seen some of it. And then parking and transportation, wayfinding, and then sustainability. We developed guiding principles through town halls. We also did surveys. We met with the executive cabinet several times, focus groups on specific subject matters, met 3 times with the academic senate, and we met with the student government. We did it in the initial, when we first started the plan a couple of years ago, and then most recently they met with the ASG to go through the plan. The guiding principles that were established clarify and cluster career communities. We started to speak to it as precincts where things would be located on campus. Increase and enhance space for study and socializing. Expand food services. Strengthen school identity. Improve wayfinding, and increase parking. We were able to do most of those. We did not increase the parking. Is there any questions? Okay, I'll move on. So when we look at our existing career communities, you can see that they're spread out across the campus. Our STEM is in blue, and you can see it's literally in all 4 corners of the campus. We have health and wellness that's spread out, and it's also a little bit over at Foothill campus. And one of the goals is for us to cluster the career communities in an area. We looked at enrollment growth. We looked at a modest enrollment growth over the 10-year period. And we then, based off of what the chancellor's office is saying, we can grow about 1.5% a year, meaning that's all they'll pay for is a growth of that rate. And then we also asked the deans to look at the programs and determine what they felt their growth were in the programs or the decreases in the programs. And you can see that some of our programs are growing much faster, like non-credit, as opposed to things like the languages, which is actually decreasing slightly. But after we compiled all the individual data from the deans, Dr. Juni worked with the deans, we then overlaid it on our original, and it's trending the same. So program growth then for facility folks equates to square footage. We call it assignable square footage. So this diagram, the plain color is our existing assignable square footage, and the dotted is the additional square footage that will be needed to accommodate the programs in 10 years. Keep in mind, we're always looking 10 years out. So in order to accommodate the growth, there was recommendations that HGA made. First of all, they're recommending renovating R and C buildings, to build an additional STEM health science building of $75,000 to $100,000, replace the student services building with a 60 to 70,000 square foot building, and to build a new academic building of 125 to 150,000 square feet. We would do selective renovations in the D and E building. We would consolidate department offices and create adjunct office space. Consolidate and improve athletics/recreation on the campus. And renovation of non-teaching spaces to create student lounge and study in each major building. And then renovate the planetarium in the boiler house, which are 2 historical buildings on campus. So what does that mean totally as far as growing the campus? Currently, the Colorado campus has 2.2 million square feet. The Serafian building, and I'm going to discuss a demolition scheme later in the presentation, but we're looking at the Serafian is roughly 91,000 square feet, and the new one would be 100,000. The women's gym's 43,000. Marvin Howard building's 46,000. The new STEM building, which would be more square footage, 75,000. Student services is currently 33,000, and the need is 70,000. New academic building would be 150,000 square feet. So we would be demolishing 213,000 and then building new 395,000. So it's an increase of almost 200,000 square feet, or a little less than 10% of the assignable square feet right now. Any questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
So I'm just thinking, I know we had some challenges with the Serafian building, and I know we're given that STEM building that we're going to build. The issue that we had as we went through our ordeal to get the Serafian building approved was that it was smaller. It was not going to fit all of the programs. Now, are we going to compensate with that by the other, having the STEM building, or how is that going to be compensated to be able to fit all of the health science group in there?
Correct. The main push in our STEM program is the sciences. We'll be able to
Okay.
accommodate the health sciences in the Serafian building, but there isn't enough for all the chemistry and biology. And that's an area that has grown, programs that have grown on our campus, and we anticipate they'll continue to grow. So that's why the recommendation for a new STEM building is 75,000 square feet.
Okay, so that's where we will compensate.
Yeah.
For what we can.
Yes.
Okay,
It was a real tug of war until we just came to the realization there's not enough space. We're trying to put too much in the 100,000 square foot building.
thank you.
I have a question also.
Okay.
So Mike, I'm sorry, I don't have my FMP book with me, but so when we say the new STEAM is 75,000 total square feet added, so is that we're tearing down those temporary science buildings, we're relocating those modules? Is that what we're doing?
We're going to abandon the modules. They're at, and I'll speak about this later when we talk about demolition, but their buildings have a life cycle, and we either have to reinvest in the life cycle and modernize the building, or we have to replace the building. And those modulars, we looked at reusing them for like interim housing, but they're built as laboratories. And then we'd have to switch them over into classrooms, and we don't think we can move them. They're that old. So we're going to look at abandoning the relocatables.
Okay.
They're generally only good for 20 years before they start falling apart.
Right. Yeah. And we had bought them used anyway. So when you say that we're only touching about 10% of the assignable space, I'm not sure I know what that means.
Okay. Good question. We're expanding our assignable space. So if we look at this graph, all those dotted areas is about a 10% growth in assignable space. So some of it is replacing end of life buildings, and some of it is increasing our assignable square footage.
Okay. Thank you.
One of the issues of the Colorado campus, actually all our campuses, is they're very dense urban campuses. So if we get too aspirational, thinking we're going to expand by 20, 30%, what is that going to do to the footprints of buildings, and how high would we have to go? So this is only expanding our assignable square feet by 10%, which would accommodate the growth that we're forecasting for the 10 years.
Mike, on the page that we're looking at, and is the removal or demolition of the temporary science labs noted?
It is not.
On the chart where you showed the removal and the exchange?
No, it is not.
That's the one I'm thinking of. So in some ways, the 75K new STEM is just replacing square footage that's now in that temporary cluster.
A good part of it.
And I don't know if it's worth redoing the slide to include that in here. But it would probably be a truer comparison to show people that we're just replacing temporary on its last leg with permanent.
Correct. I'll look that up, but there is not 75,000 square feet of.
Oh no, but there's something.
There's something, but I'll get it, and so we can calculate the delta. That's good input.
I see a question from Tammy.
Hi, just a little technicality. It says new STEAM, but you're saying STEM. So is it because STEAM includes arts? So
correct. It's actually
arts.
The architect will use the word STEAM. It's intended to be a STEM building.
Okay.
although it's not designed yet. So if they wanted to move arts in, they could, but we have our arts building, which it's housing our arts. When we look at our career communities, and I'll show that in just a second. But the arts would make more sense in the arts building and the new academic building.
Right. Just another little question is that it seems like computer sciences are growing in many institutions, but it doesn't look like so much at PCC. Is that the analysis? Is there enough space allocated for computer sciences?
I believe so. And Dr. Junie could speak to that more, but we have computer sciences, we have cybersecurity, we have computer technology, which is more infrastructure and networking. And that's in the current IT building and the math department right now. So we could show you where those are. They're in, and I'll probably get this wrong, Dr. Anajanis, but I believe they're in our business career community.
I believe so. I need Terry to tell us, but we also just hired another computer scientist faculty. So it's definitely a growth area for us.
Yeah.
Dr. Junie, go ahead, please.
So, and Mike has kind of touched on it in regard to computer science and computer education careers. It does fall in two of our divisions. It falls under computer science, and it also falls under CIS. And the CIS program is in the business and engineering technology division. They're in the IT building. And then the computer science department is in the R building, and both of those areas are growing. And they, as Mike said, we haven't indicated exactly what's in all of these buildings, but through both the new academic building as well as the new STEM building, computer science and engineering will also get probably additional space, because those are both areas that are growing.
Thank you.
I have a very quick question or request. Dr. Bush, if we could just add an additional column and also add in the letter name that we call these buildings, just for help clarification, because some people know them by their letter names and some by the longer name.
Yeah, we're trying to fix that, but just saying.
And that actually goes back to the 1930s, right after the Long Beach earthquake. They started giving them letters. But the Serafian's the U in the UU building. The women's gym is the W. The Marvin Howard is the V. There's no letter for the new building. And the student services is the L building.
Thanks.
Terry has his hand up.
Terry's hand is up again.
If you could go back, Mike, to that slide, I wanted to comment on Trustee Martin's question about you not including the Science Village in the demolition. Part of it is actually because you're demolishing the Serafian, which that 91,000 square feet is not currently used.
Yeah.
What would have been in there is in Science Village as well as the Health Science Village on the Foothill campus. And so in trying to do a cumulative addition, it gets complicated because that 91,000 is actually unusable space.
Yeah, I'll accept that point and let you decide how you want to do it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Trustee Chen Lao, you're next. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. I understand that this was all done pre-COVID-19, and given that certainly we're in this whirlwind of disruptions and these challenging times. Do you think that this is COVID-19 is gonna impact the planning of this? I know that we are looking at this 10 years out. In the next few years, do you anticipate enrollment projections are gonna fluctuate, and how would that impact this?
Well, I'm hesitant to use such a dramatic recent event that has been very disruptive to change a long-term forecast. I still maintain, I believe students like coming to a campus. There will, I believe distance ed has its role, and students like a blending of distance ed and face-to-face. And I believe education is a social activity. The COVID-19 will affect the planning as far as timing, but in the end, your buildings need to be maintained. They need to be replaced. And I do believe career communities are going to be here for some time.
Yeah, and I think, I think it's very hopeful that people have seen, we did really suddenly on the turn of a dime, we moved everything online, and we did it in instruction, we did it in student services, we did a lot of stuff. But the fact is, the majority of our students did not come to PCC to be online. They don't want to be online, and they're not happy. And that's why we have a mix of classes. If it were a normal semester, we have online options for folks, we have face-to-face options for folks, and it's because people learn in different ways. So there may be some fluctuations that come in the next couple of years that there's no way we could have forecast, but the overall forecast was done according to generally accepted demographic research. And I don't think COVID-19 is going to dramatically change it to the point where how we've structured the FMP would significantly change.
John Martin, please.
Yeah, I had a similar question to Sandra on that. I've had it several times throughout the process, even almost pre-COVID, and came to, because I was concerned about the trending demographics and a declining population in our K-12 districts. And as we heard at the beginning of this presentation, it's based on a state maximum, I think, of 1.5% growth. And as I considered those things, I thought we are in a better position planning closer to what we think the maximum could be, knowing that future decisions we can always pare down. It's much easier to pare down in the future and say, maybe we don't need to do this, maybe we don't need to do that, than it is to get 7-8 years in and all of a sudden say, wow, we just really missed it, we needed this, and there's no way to fit it in now. Mm-hmm. So in respect to that same idea, I think we're wise to err slightly on the side of a greater capacity, rather than err on the side of a lesser capacity, because we do have more flexibility to adjust off a greater capacity plan than a lesser capacity plan in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, point well taken, John. And I would also add, for some context, the last time we were presented with I wouldn't call it an FMP, but I would call it a list of buildings that could have led to a bond issuance in 2016. At that time, that list of buildings would have resulted in a 50% increase in FAR, floor area ratio. And this, Dr. Bush indicated, leads to about a 10% increase. So that is, we're more replacing buildings whose useful lives have reached close to the end than making a significant addition. Dr. Bush, it might be good to show graphically, how 1.5% per year enrollment increase over time, and these buildings aren't going to be on campus tomorrow, to show that as the student population enrollment potentially increases, what buildup that is over 10 years. In 10 years, that's a 15% increase in enrollment if we hit it.
I do have a question that's a little bit of a a follow-up on that. So I know when I was on the F&P committee, we had brought this up, as John said, and we talked about some fluidity in access, I guess, for our students. And I guess in the past, Tony has talked about Campus Light, and we brought that up, I think, when HGA was there. So is there going to be anything in the FMP that would indicate that we would be planning for maybe off-site satellite meeting spots for the students? You know, I think the prediction is that there will be a number of students who will now really want to embrace sort of these virtual learning access. So would the FMP include any of that?
The FMP within our campuses includes areas for students to meet, to socialize, to receive services spread out through the campus. It also includes spaces, affinity spaces for different affinity groups, say like the veterans, to have a place to meet. And one of the things that came from working with our students, both in surveys, interviews, and being on the committee, they're looking for areas where they can study together and sit at a table and do schoolwork together. Also to discuss ideas and have a collegial atmosphere. So that's being incorporated into all the campuses' designs. But as far as a completely remote conference room, we have not addressed that in this plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so this is the current state of our campus. And those are the letters on the buildings, how it's laid out. And this is what we're proposing the campus be when we're completely finished. So you can see the areas that are kind of orange rust, they're the new construction. And then the blue are the renovated buildings, major renovations.
Can you go back to the way yes, great, thank you. Okay, thank you.
So this is the impact that campus layout will have on our career communities. You can see where the STEM will be all in the same area. You'll see areas for like the business industry. You'll see where the arts is. And then that's why I'm saying the new academic building is closer to the arts building. It kind of overflows into it. And then we have a red area, which is just kind of general studies or overlap area of the career communities. This is a look at what happens with outdoor spaces. We have out in front of the C building, the mirror pools, and how it flows. It's kind of our signature area of the campus. And then we have our main quad between student services and the R building, which is the quad. And of course, we do have a somewhat of a quad area between Lancers Pass and the arts building, but it would be enhanced to a larger quad area. And of course, we have the sculpture garden area. So those would be defined outdoor spaces. And although we have areas where it's green, it's really not anticipated to be lawn. It is the front of the Colorado will probably have grass, a lawn feature, because that's kind of iconic. But in the green space areas could be gardens. It could be areas where students can have tables, be able to sit, but just outdoor areas where students can congregate and socialize and study. And then the hard spaces, you can see there's really only 2 hard spaces, and I can't really get my mouse to work on this thing, but here's a hard space. And then right over here is another hard space. So those would be hard kind of quads, and we could still put tables and umbrellas, but be able to move them out of the way for when there was like transfer day and different events happening.
Dr. Bush, quick question. I know one of the ideas here with the lime green is to have on all 4 corners of the main campus a green space or something. Do you envision monument signage on all 4 corners in the same way that we have something at the corner of Hill and Colorado presently?
Not as large, but we do need a monument and landscaping. One of the things we've noticed, especially on Del Mar, our campus bleeds into the neighborhood. And then if you're a neighbor, it doesn't really, when you look across, you have the back of the stadium or a parking garage. There's not something attractive defining the campus. So one of our goals was to have a greater campus identity on Colorado. And we do that through green space and monuments in all 4 corners, but probably not the electronic signage in all 4 corners, but something that says you've arrived at Pasadena City College.
Yeah, more passive monument signage versus the active digital sign that you have at Hill in Colorado.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Trustee Silver.
Hi. The quad is very hot. The sun really reflects off of the concrete. Is there anything besides just little umbrellas you could do to make more substantial shade?
Trees. I like trees. And we have a few that
would break the concrete to plant trees there, or
if we need to. But that's the traditional one, has some trees already. And then the new quad, we could build them in. Mm-hmm. But trees help. Yeah. Then we have umbrellas. Depending on the type of event, you put up shade structures. I think we own more pop-ups than anyone else.
And I think, and I know, Trustee Silver, that looking at shade will be definitely part of the conversation. You don't really see it there because this is more about the building than it is about the landscaping. But that is one of the most interesting things about Pasadena City College since I've been there, because I came from a campus, LA Valley College. We had 1,800 trees. And so we had a lot of natural shade. We also had a lot more wind and that makes a big difference. The air is very still in our microclimate. So shade will be very important. It's just not there in the landscaping.
Yeah, we have a number of trees that are unique, and we're beginning to catalog them, and then we'll continue planting trees. But in the long run, that's the best thing, I think, for the shade.
Thank you.
Okay. So we talked a little about wayfinding, and there's a nice summary of the type of signage we have, which is really all over the place. We have some things that have been up for over 20 years, and they're using weird fonts and different things. Alex Bucklehide and marketing have kind of come up with our signature graphics, our more iconic graphics. And then we worked hard to identify types of signage, types of schemes, so we could have a unique branding to us and make sure we share that. Another thing that came up during our wayfinding committee is having more international symbols. You'll see them at the bottom. and be able to put those on buildings and on a directional signage, so people don't have to read the whole sign, but they'll be able to see that this is a bus stop, or these are restrooms, or you know, the no smoking, the cafeteria. So we're going to be incorporating a lot of those symbols in our signage. We looked at parking and transportation. Parking, currently, this is the Colorado campus. And we have our lots 10 and 11, actually 9, 10, 11, but 10 and 11 are very unique because Caltech owns those. They own the land, and we have a 40-year lease, but at some point, Caltech's going to want to do something with that land, and then we'll have a conversation about mitigating our parking, which they are open to when they bought the land. They were upfront. They will help us mitigate our parking when it comes time to use it. You see lot number 6. Lot number 6, we're going to lose that lot to the new STEM building. And we'll also lose the tennis courts where we'll put in new parking. So net will pretty much be the same. We're recommending expanding the parking garage 4 to bring it into lot 3 and have a smaller lot 3 and have a garage over part of lot 3.
What is the for parking? What is the challenges with our students with parking? Are they finding that there are enough parking spaces, or is that hard to come by?
The biggest challenge is a parking permit's a hunting license. So they get the parking permit and then they got to go find a space. So we did surveys and we only hit 85% of our capacity, but how do we communicate where those open spaces are? Mm-hmm. So we're looking at getting counters in the garages and the student parking lots, which counts the number of cars that go in, the number of cars that go out, and they know the net available spaces. And then having that with an app. So students can check before they arrive at campus, oh, parking, garage number 5 is full, I got to go to garage 4.
And Trustee Sarkisian, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, that parking counter thing would be huge for students. Just kind of what Trustee Chen Lao was saying, I think parking is a huge, like, again, also just a huge aspect of, I mean, I know in a lot of community college, it's not just a Pasadena problem. It's like a thing for students of like, how early do I need to get there to get parking? So I think personally with my own ad hoc committee, we've talked, student run ad hoc committee, we've talked about this, and that's their just number one concern, because it's like, how early do I need to get up now to go to class? How, you know, something they also brought up was during this time, especially when there's construction going on, I think there is a student consensus there. They want these new buildings and they want all these great stuff planned over the next 10 years. But during like the biggest halls, if there's, you know, if a whole parking lot is down, if professors could be more like understanding, that's something they were saying, of being late to class if they can't make it just because of the lack of parking, or they have to get up earlier. And I know that's not going to be like all students, but that was just their concern about this. But I think the counter and on the app, and I've tried the app recently and it's great. I think that is like revolutionary.
Yeah. And we don't have to wait for major construction to start implementing some of those things. If we put the counters on just the 2 garages, that would be a big improvement.
I have a question, a comment. Rather.
Yes.
This is Trustee Brown. So the parking has always been a little confusing to me, because should we know what percentage of our students are driving to campus? Because we have all of this Metro passed and and we're still having problem with parking. So how is this actually working? It seems to me like it's not working. If the students, according to Alex, are having problems finding parking and they're commuting on bus. So is there a way we could find out what percentage of our students are actually using the Metro and how many people are driving? I think that would be good for the future.
We can find the number of students that we've helped or sold a Metro Pass to. We can look at the number of parking passes, either long-term or daily passes we sell. We do encourage other types of transportation other than a car and parking. But the main issue that we've heard from the students and our survey tells us that we have enough parking spaces, is just finding that space. And if a student has to spend a half hour driving through lots to find the parking space, it's very frustrating. So
okay, so what you propose is good then if they
right.
have an application. Okay, so that's good. Okay.
Trustee Martin had a question. Sorry to interrupt, Mike.
No problem. Yes, sir.
Actually, it's PCC fun fact. So back before we built the structures, and there was a real parking dilemma, or before we built all the structures, we used to limit the number of student parking permits so that if you had a parking permit, you were relatively assured to easily find a parking spot. And that change was led by a student trustee, and I give this fun fact, especially for Erica, named Scott Swankin, who developed the Swankin plan, where we wouldn't limit the number of sale of parking permits, so that basically students could self-select if they wanted a head hunting license for a parking spot or not. So it was this Swankin plan where we changed it over to the more robust system, shall I say, that we use now. So
Even
that's just
back then.
Just a little fun fact for Erica. So
that is classic.
Yes.
Okay.
He's going to be, Trustee Swankin will be following you forever. I do have a question on this. So I had brought this up before. So back several years ago, I was told we had a parking plan, a parking traffic study. And this was because we were fighting for better pricing for the MTA passes. And we had heard that when we had so many of our students using MTA passes, we had reduced the need for parking, which is one of the reasons I'd rather see our students put their, I'd rather see us be able to fund public transportation for them rather than using our space for these parking structures. But I thought when we talked about it with HGA, we were both going to look for the previous traffic study, which I guess was never found. And then we were going to do some kind of a traffic study.
Well, we weren't going to hire HGA to do a traffic study. We hired them to do a parking study, and they brought in the traffic engineer to do the parking. But we haven't looked at the traffic on the Colorado or Del Mar, or count the cars, and we are still looking for that traffic study, but it's not in my office, and Richard hasn't been able to find it. We do have a warehouse full of boxes, and as we're scanning those boxes into electronic records, we're looking for that as we go through it. But that's a slow process.
Yeah, I can imagine.
When I would like to talk about the public transportation, because we do support it and we advocate for it, and we advocate for bicycles also. But we run shuttles to the Metro stop. We also are working with the buses with Metro to have they have a new line that they're looking at, and we're working with them to have it terminate at the college. And we're going to probably, and it's still up for discussion, but around parking lot 1, have a cutout where they can charge their bus. It's an electric bus. And so at the end here, students will be able to get off and go to class. They'll charge the bus and then they'll go up to, I think it's Union they're thinking about, and then they would go to back around the loop. So we're working with groups to get busing. Out by the Muir Pool, right about in front of the D building, there's a cutout for busing right now where they drop off at campus coming down Colorado. So we continue to work with the public transportation, and we also run our shuttles to the metro stops. And we run shuttles from Rosemead to the main campus, or excuse me, the Colorado campus. So that helps with students not having to drive between campus.
Yeah, I was glad to see that that service put in. Yeah,
What
I think whatever we can do to reduce the need for the parking and using up our land for parking, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, and we're pushing for bicycles. We're seeing a little uptick on bicycles coming in as an alternative. And as you know, the buses, you can put bikes on also, so you could take the bus part way and bicycle the rest of the way.
Yeah, you know, one of the companies in Pasadena that makes those Irby electric scooters, it's a Pasadena company, and they actually were hired by USC to run their transit center for multimodal transportation, not just Irby's, but you know, you can put our PCC logo on one of those. So it'd be kind of cool to do that.
Yeah.
Well, there certainly is probably an increase in Uber or Lyft, you know, as well around campus. Would that be part of the parking study or the transportation study?
No, I don't believe so. I believe the transportation study was done before ride sharing was a big thing.
Okay.
We do have limited ride sharing, and it seems to be more in the evening. And they drop off at the main entrance off a hill. We have that turnaround right here. So they'll pull in, drop off, and take off. And you'll see people waiting to be picked up there.
Trustee Martin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, a couple quick comments. So before we had any parking structures, parking was extremely important to me. It was one of the mantras upon which some of my early candidacies ran, especially for my district without a PCC Rosemead, without good bus service back then. And it's very important. As we stated in the beginning of our 5 or 6 major desires or accomplishments we're trying to get in the master plan, the one objective we didn't probably do as well on was parking. And in some ways, I'm comfortable where we are for the moment with parking. Not that, because number one, as just described by so many other trustees, there are other alternatives to driving a car these days. Number two, as we discussed in the potential COVID fallout, we may see the desire or the necessity of more online or hybrid classes requiring less parking. And then number three, I appreciate the way from earlier presentations, we have some flexibility for future decisions in parking. And in particular, I remember lot 3, where there's some plan here in this plan, and Mike can correct me, to maybe make part of lot 3 multi-level to afford more parking, but not all of lot 3 to be multi-level. But we could at a later time, as a slight variance of this plan, if we find we are parking deprived, either expand the amount of lot 3 that goes into multi-tier, or we may even consider, you know, acquiring additional real estate similar to 10 or 11, where at some point we could even do more multi-parking. So we're taking a lot of time in this presentation on parking, and parking is very important because if we can't get our students to campus, what good is it but I do appreciate the way I view this plan, giving us some flexibility in the future as we see the fallout of some of the trends that have occurred more recently with different forms of transportation, to adjust at that time to make sure we can accommodate our students.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the final thought on parking is we did not go to subterranean parking because of the cost, but at some point in the future, that is an option a future board could consider. There is no subterranean parking in this plan. So sustainability. It used to be that we went with what we would call LEED, and we'd have a LEED certified building. And our arts building is LEED certified. And that would say what sorts of sustainable building materials, how does the building operate, what's the impact on the carbon footprint. Higher ed is moving more towards STARS, which looks at both the academic, it looks at campus engagement, it looks at how we do operation, planning and administration, and innovation and leadership. It still looks at what are we doing with the building, but it talks more about how we use the building. Are we including sustainability in our academics? Are we engaging the campus community in sustainable efforts? And then what are we doing in planning and administration, like in our purchasing specs? Do we have sustainable requirements when we bid things out? And then looking at various innovations. We did a preliminary assessment of STARS, and we're actually hitting something in all the areas. And we would, if we filed to be part of STARS, the architects feel will come in at a bronze level now. And then as we look at our new construction, we could then probably enhance that. And there is a lot of interest both with our students and our faculty. And in fact, they've reinitiated the sustainability committee and looking at ways we can improve our operation and our engagement on campus. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about demolition. This is an area that I received some constructive criticism on when I had the town hall, because I kind of flew through the demolition and why are we demolishing certain areas of the campus. It isn't simply to rearrange buildings, although urban planning is very intriguing and what we could do with the public spaces is engaging. But why would we say we don't need this student service building? And why did we get rid of the Serafian building? And what's wrong with the W building and the V building? Well, we look at generally what we would call the facility cost index, and that's something the chancellor's office tracks. And when we get above 50%, and what that would be the cost to repair the building versus the cost of the building. So when we're getting above 50%, then people start discussing replacing the building. Then when we look at something, and we'll use the V building for an example. The V building is not ADA compliant. It has and everything was up to code in 1968 when that building opened. But that was pre-DSA, pre-Americans Disability Act. It has no elevators in it. It has a weird ramp that you have to go into either the R or the C building and go down a ramp that frankly is too steep to be compliant.
Yeah, it's not compliant. It's so not compliant.
And the other issues we have in that building is there is no female restrooms. It was the shop building and there is only male restrooms in it. The fire safety was built to code at the time. It's not to current code. So besides it having a FCI, facility cost index, of 58%, we would then have all these additional things we'd have to do to bring the building up to code. The W building.
Did you say the D? Did you say D as in dog?
No, V.
V as in Victor.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, not the iconic buildings.
Yeah, no. The three iconic buildings are there, and then we have two real historic buildings that we're not.
No, Belinda, what he's saying is that the V Victor building is a dog.
It is.
Yeah, exactly. It's a dog. It's a dog.
Okay. It is only. It's semi-functional now, but it is not a proper educational environment.
Mike,
W building's worse.
Mike, if I could make a suggestion here, this is just a presentation suggestion. If on the demolition, if on this slide, you could only put the buildings that are being demolished.
Okay.
And label them. And I understand, like, say in the northeast corner, you're demolishing some parking lot and making some green space. But to me, it would be more informative just to see the buildings that we're demolishing and to put the letter on them to help us understand the buildings being demolished.
Will do.
Okay, thank you.
So we have the W building, which was the women's gym. In that building, it's also not ADA compliant. The plumbing is almost failed in there. And to the point that 2-inch supply lines going into the building have burst. And we're going through and we'll replace a 20-foot section. And then later, a year or two later, we're having another section burst. There was a fire in the building that was never repaired. So that's another issue that needs to be cleaned up. And then immediately when you hear, oh, there was a fire, you notice there's no fire sprinklers because in the 60s, we didn't put them in the buildings. And although there is a fire alarm system in there, it doesn't have ADA enunciators. It doesn't have the strobes. It doesn't have a sprinkler system. So to repair that building, and it has a 54% FCI, would be cost prohibitive also.
There's also no elevator in that building. So in order to get to the second floor, if you are not, if you are in a wheelchair or differently abled, you have to go into the Robbins building, the R building, and take a ramp over.
Okay. So those are the three buildings that we'd be looking at demolishing and replacing. We're also looking at the pool because
Mike, before, pardon the interruption, before we go to the pool, I think it would be helpful for us if you made a chart with a few rows and a few columns describing on the chart what you just described to us verbally, and that is the name of the building, the facilities index number that it's at, a list of the few reasons why that building is obsolete, and if you have it, what it would cost that instead of demolishing it, we were to, the expense it would take to fix all those projects and bring it current, and to help demonstrate the impracticality. And I'm asking that because I got the same kind of feedback from my constituents that you just mentioned. The single, the two biggest questions or issues or critique in the town, in the public forum that we just held was, why are we tearing down these buildings? So I think if you can demonstrate that on a chart, that will help to explain why.
Well, can I just interject here and say that Mike's feedback was the feedback you gave me. So it wasn't separate feedback, number one. And number two, the charts that you're talking about, I just want to understand, where exactly do you want those charts to appear once they're made?
Well, you guys can figure that out, but it seems like it would be, you know, in this section of the presentation.
Okay, so as part of the permanent record of the presentation upon which the board considered the FMP.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it would be. Thanks.
Okay. We can do that.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was moving into the pool, which isn't a huge expense to move the pool, but the main issue with the pool is it needs to be drained and completely replastered. All the pool equipment needs to be replaced, including the heater. When it was first built, it had what's called a cogeneration unit. So when you ran the heater, it produced electricity, and that has not been working for 5 or 6 years. So when we're looking at the layout of the campus and where Science Village is, the idea if we could put the pool there, and then it would be available for recreation activities. Currently, during the summer, when the youngsters come on campus for their swim lessons, they have to go through the complete campus. And sometimes they're not accompanied by their parents. So the idea if we had an entrance off of Bonnie, then the YMCA or the city or whoever's running the swim lessons could have an entrance that's off of the campus. So, and then the rest of it's pretty much parking or grounds work that we're talking about ripping up to put something else there. Okay. So this is the new construction that we're looking at. And then the blue is the modernized buildings. And then the yellow is the parking. And we talked about extending lot 4 out into lot 3 on a multi-level. And the other thing we would be able to address is our neighbors are continually frustrated by people exiting lot 4 and wanting to take a left onto Del Mar instead of a right only, and traffic congestion problems. So we could reconfigure the exit to have it go out on Hill, so not to impact the residents across the way. Okay, so we can't shut the campus down to do all this construction. So we have to do it in phases in order to keep the campus open. So the very first thing we're going to move forward with is the Serafian building. And then the first phase we're suggesting should be the new STEM building, as well as a new food service building in the circular area there, as well as expanding lot number 4. Then the second phase would be a new student services building and the swimming pool. And you notice we're kind of working across the campus so we don't have projects stacking up on one another. Then number 3 will be in the center of campus, would be the new academic building. 4 would be modernize the R building. 5, which 6 will be at probably around the same time, would be modernizing the C building. So those are the phases. Each phase will take about 2 to 3 years planning till open, but we can overlap phases. So while we're constructing phase 1, we could be doing the design work for phase 2 and then roll through the projects in that manner.
So Mike, when you're talking about modernizing R and C, that means renovating R and C, right? Are
Correct.
you talking about, we're not, but what is the level of renovation? Are you thinking about completely regutting both buildings, or you know, on the scale, is this, a lot of work or cosmetic?
No, D&E would be cosmetic. No, this is gutting the building, putting in new mechanical systems. They both need new HVAC, new plumbing, updated electrical.
Plus, I need my Taj Mahal office. Just
Yes,
saying.
yeah, we're working on that.
I know.
And then the C building, over the years, we have captured classroom space and converted it to offices or the administrative services like printing, things like that you find in the basement. And it would be nice to restore it to classrooms. We could get a lot of more classroom space out of that building.
Especially that backside. That's kind of weird.
Yes.
That
Well, yeah.
unused space.
There's a lot. The alleyway.
Yeah, the alleyway. Like, what is that?
I have my comments, but it goes back to the 1970s. So,
Yeah.
but there used to be a street here, and actually the street would come down like this, and then we'd be able to go in, and they did things in the alleyway back there. But that's a whole area of the campus that really needs to be cleaned up and refreshed, is the backside of that building. And then if we didn't have the V building here and you could go across to the arts building, it would all flow a lot nicer.
I'm excited to hear that Erica's going to get new offices in phase 5, which will probably be about 2030.
Yeah.
So that means we're going to get to keep her for a while. So that's just, I love that plan, Erica. I'm right with you on that.
Oh, that's funny. That's very nice, John. Thank you.
That's why we put it in phase 5. Okay. So any questions? Right. So
So going back to the Seraphim building, that was approved. It was the total cost of the building is not approved, right? I mean, we still need to. There's still a budget gap of what the building costs and what the state gave us.
Correct.
So,
and that is going to be the last thing we discuss today.
right.
And I'll have a slide that actually has the numbers on it.
Okay.
Yeah, so hold that thought. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So Foothill campus. Foothill campus, the main classroom building, the community center needs to be remodeled. Fairly extensive, but not as much as the C&R buildings. And then we're recommending a new 24,000 square foot building. And it would be located in Lot B where the relocatables currently are. But because we put that building in, and keep in mind, one of the more aggressive growths is in non-credit. So that's why we're recommending this building, although non-credit could also be offered on the Colorado campus. But we would still,
Mike, just to confirm, that area there where you're doing that addition, we'll call it Lot B, that is on land that we own as opposed to land that we lease across the street, so to speak.
correct. That's land we own, but it will necessitate that we continue our love-hate relationship with Edison and leasing those lots under the power lines.
Yeah.
Okay. The Rosemead campus recommendations, let's see, I have people in the way of my recommendation. Okay. We're looking at the existing building needs to be refreshed. And then we need to add an additional 20,000 square feet. If we went 2-story, it would be a 40,000 square foot building, which will make that campus quite large compared to what it is now, triple the space at the campus.
Are you thinking about this being non-credit as well?
There is, we could offer some there, but we...
Credit.
Okay, so the big issue here is we would be taking parking up.
Mm-hmm.
And we will be short parking in the end.
And we don't own the building.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Or the land.
Or the land.
Yeah. So, and that's something the facility committee discussed, and we had direction to send a letter of inquiry to El Monte School District to see if they'd be interested in selling it. But then COVID-19 hit, so we haven't sent those letters off. We had same direction for Pasadena Northwest.
Trustee Sarkisian, you have your hand up, sir.
I just want to double check something because there's something one of my committee members brought up. Parking will not be affected at Rosemead, right? In terms of less parking.
There would be less parking if we put a building in the middle of the spaces.
Okay.
So right now, this where it says new building is all parking.
It's staff parking though, which means staff would take student parking.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But it seems to me that there's a lot of parking around the neighborhood, and I haven't seen any restricted parking.
Not yet.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sure if the neighbors get upset, they might.
So Mike, if we were to do an expansion like this and lose parking, when we do buildings, our jurisdictional agency is DSA, but does the city have any say-so in parking ratio requirements such that they could tell us, no, you can't do that because now your ratio of parking to ratio of building square footage, instructional square footage is now too low, and we don't want the cars spilling out into the neighborhood. Does the city of Rosemead have any jurisdiction over this?
Yes.
Thank you, Tony.
You can only have, you have to have so many parking. It depends on the city codes. But yes, there's great restrictions on that. Can I ask a question to you, Mike? Because I was at your other presentation. You mentioned that that we probably, tell me if I'm wrong, we probably wouldn't go forward with renovating this campus if we didn't own it, and that we might be better off looking at another site, correct?
Sort of. What I think, and this isn't my private club, and I'm not an elected trustee. This is a decision the trustees would need to make. My recommendation is either you have a very long lease or you own it, because without that, you will not get the return on your investment. And currently we're on 5-year leases with them. So if you needed to put $1 million into the building, and they could say goodbye in 5 years, you wouldn't get your 30-year investment out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you had a 40-year lease or a 99-year lease, sometimes municipalities and districts are interested in selling the building and giving you a long land lease because they don't want to part with the land. That's an option. But currently, the current lease structure would not warrant a large cash investment.
And Tony, I concur with Mike's guidance, thought process on that. Either, if we're going to make significant capital improvements anywhere in our campuses, either we own the land, which would probably be our best preference, but also a long-term lease of sufficiently long length would be justification to put significant capital expenditures on that property.
I agree with you. I wouldn't approve anything if we didn't have a lease or another site.
So I agree too, but where do these decisions for Rosemead and Muir fall within the phasing of the rest of the facilities construction?
Towards the end. So probably 5 years into it, but they could be moved up. Their phasing could be done at any time. You could have a need. I think one of your greatest needs is PCC Northwest.
Yeah.
The building, it needs a lot of TLC. If we're
Foothill would have to wait until the Serafian building is built. That's the only phasing issue.
Right.
So yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Because part of it is because are we anticipating growth in Rosemead or Foothill at the same? We're probably not anticipating the same rate of growth as of these two campuses as we are with the Northwest, or what is the anticipated rate of growth for these campuses?
We didn't run the growth figures separately. We ran them by programs, and we can push programs in or out.
Okay.
Yeah.
May I say something?
Yes, Trustee Brown.
Thank you. I didn't mean to bust in, but you guys didn't see me. But going back to the discussion on, where is it? Muir and Rosemead. So there's a lot of energy and time has been spent. And as far as Rosemead is concerned, we have seen the tremendous increase in our students.
Yep.
It's just amazing. So as far as I'm concerned, and I agree 100% that we should not invest a lot of money that we cannot recoup with a short lease. So if we're talking about a 20-year lease, I continue to say that it is doable. And unfortunately, the coronavirus struck, but this may just not be a bad idea either. So, when people are in dire need, you never know what happens. So no, I think we need to try as much as possible to lock in those leases. I would not be happy seeing us looking for another area in Rosemead or, for that matter, in Northwest Pasadena. So these are things that I agree with you, Dr. Bush. We should not invest in excessive amount of money on something that we don't own. But again, I think both of those candidates are doable. I think they will come through. So that's my take.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Brown. Any other comments? Any other?
I did. Erica.
Comments?
Oh, thank you. I can't see you. I have to make sure I know who's speaking. Thank you, Erica.
Trustee Martin, you're next, sir.
Yeah, just I view what I'm seeing here for Northwest and Rosemead more or less as a placeholder for things to come. There's no conceivable way, and I will stand corrected by Mike and Erica, but the last report I remember hearing specifically on Rosemead, there'd be no way for Rosemead to grow as it's pretty much maxed at
It's
where
maxed
it is.
out. Yeah.
Every classroom, every day, all the time, it's maxed. So, that's a very positive indication for the success of the program and the need and for greater potential. But obviously this 20,000 square feet is a placeholder to see what are some options there, what fits the needs of some of the other public institutions, How can we do that? So I view this as a basic placeholder. Obviously, we'll be smart going forward in whatever we do, not putting a large sum of money into something of a very short magnitude.
And I would just follow up and agree with John and say, you know, given the huge geographic spread of our district, I think these satellite campuses are extremely important for accessibility for the outer reaches of our district.
Want to talk a little bit about PCC Northwest. The building needs a lot of work. My counterpart, Leslie, at the district, we've had conversations. The Unified District is having issues with enrollment at John Muir, and they are open to either a longer lease. They have a committee that hasn't been meeting because of the COVID-19 about the disposition of properties. And she's encouraged us to get in a line because our use of the property is something that would not be counter to their district mission, i.e. a charter school or a private school buying something that would help drain. We have a collegial with our dual enrollment there. Another interesting thing about John Muir was originally built as a college by the Pasadena School District when it was K-14. And it was the second college in the area that did terminus degrees. So the idea is they would go to 13 and 14 it'd actually be 11 the junior, senior year and 2 more years, and they graduate and they would go to work. So that was originally the second college campus, and I believed it was roughly in the 60s when it closed and became just a high school. So it'd be nice to get a more long-term presence there again as a college, and not have it be torn up and turn into a yard for the city to park things in. So I'm advocating for John Muir. I like it. So, but it needs a lot of work, but I think it'd be great for the community up there. Okay, so we want to talk about funding the plan. And we're going to, at a future time, talk more about bonds and types of bonds. But sometimes we get wrapped up in our facilities plan and we jump right into, oh my gosh, the economy, what's going on. But I want to try to separate them. The current cost estimates for this plan is $708 million. That's a lot of money. And it doesn't include things like buying those sites. On a Prop 39 bond, which I would recommend, and we can go in through the difference between a Prop 39 and a Proposition 46 bonds later, but a Prop 39 bond, which is a simple majority, must be held on a regularly scheduled local election. You cannot have a special election. So given what's happening with the economy, we want to look at what opportunities would we have moving forward to put a bond on the ballot. We have this November of 2020. The next opportunity would be March 2022, then November 2022, the March 2024, and then November 2024. So those are our different opportunities to place a bond on the ballot. So just a second, I was attacked by my dog. Ryder? Ryder, I'm in a board meeting. Could you? Yeah, so.
Ryder's his son, not the dog.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay.
Zoom land. So when we're looking at what's going on with the economy, I got to be honest. I don't know if now's the proper time to put a bond on the ballot. We're going to do surveying. We're going to find out. But I believe with the amount of economic pain out there, it may not be as popular. But that doesn't mean our plan is flawed. We have a good plan. We may just be looking to a future date to fund it. So in less than 2 years, we would be able to put it on a March ballot. If the economy's turning, this would be an incredible economic stimulus for our community, but it has to be right. And we committed to develop a plan based off our educational needs, to cost out that plan, and then to do survey data so the board would know what the community's thinking. We're still moving forward with the survey data, but I want to temper our expectations. I think a lot of us read what's going on in the economy. This may not be the right time. And with that, I'll give it to the board if you want to.
I have a question regarding the survey. What would it cost to have a survey? And why should we pay for one during these times when we already know what the answer is going to be?
So, Alex, do you want to talk a little bit about this? And I want to just point out that the foundation is paying for this. We are not paying for this.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. Since late last year, we started conversations with a survey firm through the foundation to, get some ideas of a study, to get the sense of what the community would think about a bond support. And as you know, the COVID thing came along and we've been postponing the collection of that data since. We basically have been waiting for a time when folks will be able to consider the concept of supporting the college in this way and can respond to questions about, their needs and the college's needs and priorities when things are not too clouded by the day-to-day news about what's been going on with coronavirus. As you can imagine, that's been a very complicated needle to thread because the news just keeps on coming. So we've had a survey in development and in the wings for quite some time, and we've been waiting for the right time to do that. We had thought that mid-May or May would be the right time to be in the field to collect that information, but we're still working with our advisors to see when it would be best to get out there and get that information collected.
Yeah.
And I need to correct the record here that actually we are paying for the survey. It's the whole bond campaign and consultant that we don't pay for.
Right.
Thank you for correcting, Dr. Buck.
And I think just to clarify very quickly that we have some assumptions about what we might know about this, but those who were on the board 4 years ago now will remember that we did see substantial support from the community for the concept of a bond, and particularly for the college. So I think to assume that evaporated in the wake of what's going on with the coronavirus, I think we don't quite know that. So we're curious to know what the answer would be, and it's an investment we're ready to make in the context of this overall project. Mike, do you want to take up more of that?
Yes.
Well, I would like to get an idea of how much it's going to cost us. That's what I want to know.
Well,
I'd
be happy to address that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'd be happy to address that. It's roughly $20,000 for the survey, and we already hired the company. We already paid them to develop it, and so it's a matter of executing it and getting the product now. We're under contract currently.
Okay, well, that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, we started it, 6 months ago, pre-COVID. We didn't know.
And neither our political consultant for feasibility nor the survey person's been billing us while we've been idle. They did realize with COVID-19 they had a pause. So they've been upfront that way and not charging us while we've been pausing. But we are under contract to complete the survey.
Okay. And my question is, if the survey questions were developed pre-COVID, do we need to rethink and possibly take another look and maybe change the questions we're asking, or maybe they're still the same questions?
Yeah, well, some will be the same. We're interested to know what the economic stimulus part, how does that ring with the voters? When we talk about this being an economic stimulus, we could also survey when's the best time. We could look at the timing issue.
And we have been actively keeping the survey up to date throughout this period of pause. So,
and our consultants are very proactive in reaching out to us and saying, this is the climate now, we need to check this. So we do have the basis, but I think we're going to be their first COVID-19 survey. They're pretty active on it.
And I'm sorry, how much is it? How much is it?
The survey part's about $20,000.
Oh, okay, so that's nothing.
What about the entire cost of the survey plus the consultants plus the feasibility?
It's a unique relationship.
I understand.
Okay, the district pays for anything before the board makes a decision to put something on the ballot.
Right.
Once the board makes a decision to put it on the ballot, the foundation picks it up.
Right.
But the whole package could be anywhere between 80 to about 150, depending on what type of campaign they're going to run.
Right.
I believe, and I'll have to confirm the numbers, but I believe we're into the consultant for about 40 and the survey for about 20.
That's about right.
And who ended up being our consultant?
The survey company is called True North Research. They're based in, I want to say San Diego County. And the consultant is TBWH. They're in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And TBWH is a lot of people with big names. I can't ever remember them.
Yeah.
So I don't have any problem going. I'm sorry. Go ahead. If you
I have one more question.
Okay.
So, so we're going to go forward with we have engaged this consultant, and we're going to go through with the polling. And most likely when we do the polling, it's going to tell us that it's not the right time. So in 2 years from now or 3 years, when we see this, or we anticipate that this is going to be a good time, do we most likely have to re-engage and repay another consultant to do the polling again?
I would recommend it.
Okay.
Because the polling will let you know the true feasibility before you invest 100 or more thousand of the foundation money to run a campaign. A campaign is not cheap for a general bond. So I'd recommend, and also, you know, there's one philosophy, you could put it on the ballot and see what happens. There's also the philosophy, I want to win if it goes on the ballot. So you want to know what the likelihood of success is before you vote to put something on the ballot.
So it's fait accompli that we're going to go forward with the survey, right?
Right.
I mean, so it's already, yeah. So I don't have any problem doing that. I do worry that trying to go out in November 2020 on for a bond is maybe pretty risky. It would be interesting to see what they come back with on the best date. But having seen so many of our school bonds fail in the last election, which was surprising, it's the first time we've seen that many fail. It seems quite unlikely that in November we would see a different turn of events. And while I hate to delay this, it's, you know, we want to be successful in getting this through, and we want our communities to feel comfortable moving this through. So, yeah, I mean, it'd be good to go ahead and do the survey. But I remember sitting through San Marino's survey and their consultant, and they said best time, you know, and that without a doubt this couldn't fail, and yet it still failed, and it was just, you know, bad timing and a number of other things, but mostly bad timing.
Yeah.
Well, I would thank you for sharing that, Linda. I would suggest that the Super Tuesday elections hadn't really been hit by COVID-19 impact yet. And there was something else at play there because we weren't staying at home and we hadn't shut down businesses and we weren't yet seeing economic impact. It was something being talked about as being in China, and it had kind of sort of gotten over here, but I don't think it had really entered people's psyche yet by March 3rd that the
No, it hadn't. It hadn't. It was voter fatigue
on business. And my
yeah,
point
it was bond fatigue. It was bond fatigue. People were tired. They'd been hit with so many bonds, and there was bond fatigue.
And
Yeah.
Prop 13.
Right, Prop 13, right, which was heavily campaigned against by Jarvis people who paralleled it to the Prop 13. So it was an unfortunate use of a proposition number, and it was, but a lot of it was bond fatigue from the voters, and
and it was bond fatigue before we even had COVID-19 impact. And somebody helped me out with the numbers here, but I heard statewide, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, there were 69 campaigns that won and 134 that lost, which is pretty unprecedented. And the San Marino numbers, which is part of our district, obviously, was pretty overwhelmingly negative. It was 60% something to like 61 to 39 or something.
Right. Yeah. We had never had an education bond fail in our community before, but there were some difficult things happening.
And honestly, Linda, I'm troubled if the surveying for the San Marino school bond said, this is going to be awesome, let's do it, now's the time. And they missed the mark by that much between the survey and the actual results. And again, I don't blame that on COVID-19. That was really before COVID-19.
Well, and that's my point is, even after the survey, I think we are community people and we have to be cognizant of what's happening in our communities.
Well, and I think one big difference is that we actually have a fully fleshed out facilities master plan. And
for sure,
correct me if I'm wrong, but what San Marino had was a needs assessment that had some suggestions for what the district needed. But in terms of having done the type of facilities plan, they had not had time to do that. So that also might have played a role. I mean, there's a lot of things.
Well, that was hugely what the campaign against the bond was. But, you know, we saw so many in 2018 that so many of the districts that didn't have facilities master plan and asking for $1 billion and they all went through. Yeah. So it just kind of depended on where the voters were. And boy, I saw so much negative campaigning in my community that I had never seen before.
Trustee Martin, you're up next.
So I know we're kind of running.
Have a comment?
Yeah.
Trustee Martin can go ahead.
Martin first, and then Sarkisian.
Okay, I'm sorry. So with the limited time we have left, and I know we have an important item coming up, or at least a review on the Serafian financing. I'd like to try to propose that maybe we can make some lemonade out of the lemons here that we're given, because I certainly share that November 2020 is not going to be the right time. And I think that affords us an opportunity, and especially in this rather gruesome time that we're in, to maybe approach El Monte and Pasadena about where they may, because, you know, we know, and we've heard from Mike, and we know what's coming down on the state is going to be very, very difficult for many. And so it might be an opportune time to start a negotiation to square up that when we are ready to go, whether 22 or 24, whenever, that included in there is the opportunity to, you know, acquire some of these sites and work towards a lease purchase agreement with these two districts. So, you know, I'm hoping that we take advantage of this time for the betterment of the district, and I ultimately believe the betterment of our general populations, to work with these other districts and maybe queue up some needed resources, financial resources that they could get by selling to us, and including that in the first round when we do decide to go out in the future.
Good point. Trustee Martin, Trustee Sarkisian, you are next, sir.
I'll keep it quick. I just wanted to, for point of clarification for myself, in these next, so like whenever we approve facilities master plans things at a meeting, at a board trustee meeting, how far into like, I guess this the sequence are we approving, or are we, and yeah, that makes sense.
So basically the board will be looking at the entire master plan, but it's not about how much the master plan costs. It's about the master plan. How it's financed is something that will be discussed either in the near future or over the next few years, looking at the finances, looking at everything that's happening in our economy. So, but the FMP is separate.
Okay, got it.
What
Thank you.
Mike is going to talk about is the Seraphian building, because we need to have that conversation.
Trustee Martin.
Yeah, quick answer to Trustee Sarkisian. So if you look at the last master plan, it's basically an approved concept on which we're going to measure our actions in the future, similar to the way our budget is an approved plan upon which we measure our financial actions for the next fiscal year. So as we move through our last master plan, we came across, changes that had to occur. And those changes were basically measured against the plan. So no, we couldn't take down the whole student service building and put up a new one, which was in our original master plan. But we made a change based on that we could refurbish the existing bones of the ones we had. So this will be the general direction. This will be the way the general direction the administration marches. There will for sure be changes. There'll be obstacles, there'll be detours, but everything will come back to the board in the context of, we're marching in the general way. We're trying to accomplish this basic objective. Here's a little problem we're facing. Here's some alternatives compared to what we had hoped to do. Okay. So I view that this is what we are approving.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a question for Mike. Would it be possible to cost out each phase? For example, phase 1, what would it cost? Phase 2? Is that something that's doable?
It's done.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I shared with the facilities committee. I know it seems so long since we were together, but that document was shared that because we talked about needing to finance it and where I made a recommendation of doing it in 2 bonds because you can only spend so much money at a time. Mm-hmm. And where we would make that break in this plan based off the costs and things like that. So we kind of roughed that out. But I wanted to make sure we got to the Seraphian building and the financing. So if we're looking at delaying a bond and to say March or November 2022, then we need to acquire some bridge financing for the Seraphian building. The current estimate of the building is 68 million. The state will pay 45 million, and we'd be looking at a little over 23 million to be the district's share of the construction. Okay, so we're going to need to come up with somewhere around $23-25 million. At the last audit and budget committee, Trennis Wright, our banker we dealt with Piper Sandler, joined the meeting and presented some options for a COP. That's a certificate of participation. And a COP is like a car lease. we put up a property. It could be the one we're building, or it could be an existing building, and we're paying lease payments on it. And if we pay off the whole thing, it's going to go out, 25 years or so. But you can have these COPs paid off by general bond elections if you write them into the election. So if we're looking at needing two to 3 years financing before there would be a general bond election, then one scenario he has is to capitalize the interest payments during the construction phase of the Serafian building. So for these 2 first years, these orange years, we would not make a payment. In 2023, our payment would be 1.8 million. And then it'd be 1.8 million through the life of the lease. It's at a 4.9% interest, but this has what's called a callable in it, and it's a short callable. So these COPs can be structured or negotiated to what best fits our finance needs. So we could capitalize more interest, capitalize less interest, but this would get us through our current budget struggles, which I believe will be 2 years. And then we would start the payment. And then it would put it closer to an election in 2022. So this is something I'd recommend looking at. We'll bring back the details later. And then it's a question of timing. When do we have to get the lease? The Serafian building's in the final approval stages with the Chancellor's office. It's out of the Department of State Architecture. It's at the Chancellor's office, and then from there it gets sent to the Department of Finance. And we anticipate getting those plans ready to go for the state, ready to release their funding sometime in June. We've already got permission from the board to bid out the demolition phase, and then later we'll bid out the construction phase. So we could handle, the demolition will be roughly 3 million, and we have the funds to pay our share, the 20% of the 3 million. The state takes it $1. From the first dollar, they reimburse us 80 cents on the dollar. And that's how they work. And we put in claims as we spend the money, and they give us our 80 cents on the dollar. So sometime the demolition will last 60 to 90 days, and then we enter the construction phase. So sometime when we start the demolition, we need to then start discussing a COP and initiate the transactions. We'll want Ann Rowland, our bond counsel, involved with it. And then I recommend Trennis Wright with Piper Sandler. I think they're a good company. And he does not see any problem of doing what they call a negotiated sale on this, where he'd be able to put together the deal within 2 months.
So Mike, I have a question.
Yes.
So this is dependent then that we would be able to pay off the COP on having the bond go through. Is that what I was understanding?
That would be my recommendation, but if the bond did not go through, you'd be making the payments.
Okay, all right. I was just wondering because this is what San Marino did, and when their bond didn't go through, it kind of put them in a bad position. So as long as we have a fallback position.
We do. We have an early retirement incentive that we were paying that was at roughly 1.6 million a year, and we made the last payment this year. So we would be able to handle payments of this size in the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Linda, from my perspective, I think the way that we, the trustees, should look at this is, as Mike described it, as a bridge loan. And what it does is it enables us to capture and retain the state funding for the Serafian building, not put that funding at risk. Make sure we do that, even if the climate for a bond is not welcoming in November, which I don't believe it will be. And then let's call it a bridge loan, and it could be, you know, the actual length of the term of this loan you can see on the graph. It goes out 30 years, but we would pay it off in 2 years to 4 years from bond proceeds, and that assumes a successful bond ballot initiative for a bond somewhere out there in the next 2 to 4 years.
Yeah, I always assumed that we would handle the difference in our percentage that we had to pay out with a bridge loan. I was just worried that if we were totally dependent on a bond going through in, say, 2022, if that didn't happen, then did we have a fallback position? But I think, you know, Mike has already said then we have a way to cover this. So that's the only thing I was really concerned about.
This is a long-term financing, so we're not all of a sudden stuck short and having to repay this with no source of repayment. But we would want to repay it in 2 years or 4 years out. Trustee Martin, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So first, I just wanted to highlight to my fellow trustees, at least my opinion, that prior to COVID, I think Erica, Mike, and the whole team had really done a phenomenal job on a strategy here that queued up this facility master plan behind an education master plan, rolling right into what we had hoped in 2020 should have been a successful bond issuance. And the amount of energy they put into that strategy, the delivering on that strategy has just been unbelievable in my opinion.
Thank you.
Obviously has been totally upended by the COVID crisis, causing us now to rethink what was a brilliant strategy and well executed just has to now be changed. As we look to what the change might be, I appreciate the A plan that Mike is presenting, that we know 2020 more than likely is off the table, and the earliest is 2022. And even 2022 might, you know, who knows where we're going to be in 2022, how much of a L-shaped recovery or a swoosh or whatever you want to call this recovery is. It may not be the right time to go in 2022, and it may require 2024. And so though I am in full agreement on this A plan for this bridge loan, I am concerned about the B plan that Mike proposed. And so in some ways, I'm saying, and I'm going to reiterate what Mike just said, but I'm going to give it my own little short twist. So we've got 1.6 million previously that was going to prior SERP commitments in cash payments. That is not. And obviously 1.6 is very close to the 1.8 that we see on the chart here, which would be the amount of payment necessary in the event that our 2022 a bond, it either doesn't go on the ballot because the surveying doesn't recommend it or fails. And if we can save the 1.6 in the next 2 years, going forward, and we're sitting on an additional 3.2 to add to the 1.6 of 2022, we probably have good capabilities to go all the way to 2024 if 2022 isn't looking favorable when the time allows. In that context, his plan makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm in full agreement with it. Where I'm concerned will be in the district, the trustees, the administration's resolve to hold that 1.6 aside at a time when we've heard of some rather dire consequences coming down in the next year, and hear of potential cuts to the district that almost seem that some kind of reduction in force might be inescapable.
Yeah.
And in that backdrop, with that tremendous amount of pressure in doing something that this district has fought for decades to try not to do, and in light of increasing CalPERS, CalSTRS contributions, which we do hope the state suspends, obviously, but we have no guarantee that they're going to suspend. I see immense pressure on the administration, the board, and the district to hold back our 1.6 as a reserve in case of 2022 doesn't work. And so, you know, I kind of have to see the tea leaves the way I see them and throw that red flag out that the B plan Mike's presenting, I think, is got a little bit of difficulty in it unless we're about ready to sign off on what might be an extremely difficult circumstance. Obviously, we hope it doesn't come to that, but you know, that's the way the tea leaves are reading at the moment.
Well, if I can just say, just be really blunt about this, if we don't go with doing this project, the state will take the money away.
And we don't want to lose that.
No question.
We do not. We have worked so hard.
No, we can't lose it.
So long. And that building has sat fallow for 8 years. Like,
no, we don't want to lose 45 million.
No, and
funding.
we will lose it because the state, believe me, the best thing we could do is start drawing down and do the demolition, because the state is going to be looking for every opportunity to scoop up money. And we do not want to give them a reason, because we're not going to be in the front of the line. You know, it's not going to be us. And the other thing to keep in mind is that we also need to get started, and we need to, you know, have a shovel go into the ground, not only to reserve the money, but also because DSA stamps on plans expire. Now they're 4-year expiration, but if you take this out and say, well, you know, we don't know about 2022, what if we get to 2024? If we get to 2024 and we haven't put a shovel in the ground, we have to start the DSA process all over again. We have to meet all of the current codes, which means we will have to re-engineer, you know, we'll have to have new architecture drawings. I mean, the fact is that this alone is not going to save all of the other things we're going to have to do with the college, but the loss of $45 million really needs to be kept front and center, because that is money we will not get back.
Yeah, and Erica, if I could respond to what you're saying and possibly speak for John, but definitely speak for myself. He's not suggesting, I don't think, that one of the alternatives here is not to go forward and do this COP and finance it, but I think he's making an important point. And if we can all just look at the graph, the cool thing about this financing are those 2 orange bars there in the next 2 years.
chat?
On the channel, because the Board of Trustees, like the study session, something happened.
Oh, did we take over? Is that bad? Hello?
Time with tremendous resolve, we are really throwing some dice, some serious dice on the financial future here.
And John, I hate to be.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I hate to be overly conservative, but if I had to bet if the bond environment would be favorable in 2022 versus 2024, I'm very concerned about November of 2020. I almost feel like it's a non-starter, and I want to come back to that for just a minute. You know, Linda, you mentioned the polling at San Marino said, hey, it's great, go do it. Let's not hire that pollster, or let's ask different questions than that pollster asked San Marino, because they really missed the mark. And coming back to this issue, I think that it's much more likely that the economy will have rebounded and people will be feeling open to paying additional property taxes, more likely in 2024 than 2022. This is just an extreme economic event that rivals the Great Depression, and I don't think we'll even be back in 2 years. So I think what John is talking about, not only is it a theoretical possibility, I think it's the more likely outcome. If we could get this done in 2 years, that would be awesome. Awesome, more awesomer, right, Erica?
That's right, awesomer.
I think it's more likely it would be 4 years when the environment is right again for a bond.
And again, this is something for a future board. This next week, we're approving a master plan that I am just highly supportive of this master plan. And we all understand the critical nature of getting that Serafian building going. There is a third possibility, which the committee heard in presentation, or I think maybe we did, or maybe we didn't, where we go to a plan of no orange bars and we start paying on our COP immediately with a 1.6. There's no need to have a reserve. We're just utilizing the money straight ahead. We'll come out ahead on saving interest. The benefit of the plan that Mike's presenting is that if we are successful in 2022 or 2024, in essence, we are using the GO bond to cover all of this debt, where if we start making payments immediately using the 1.6 in savings, 2 years from now, we could do a GO bond to pick up the balance, but we will have lost 2 years of payment at 1.6 that cannot be refunded through the GO bond. So in some ways, it's a forced savings plan. On the other hand, we're out $1.6 million a year without any hope of recovery, where at least this plan, we do have hopes of the GO bond funding every single year of the COP. And so, I think there's a couple different alternatives for us to look at. But this particular alternative, which makes a lot of sense, does require a tremendous amount of resolve in a very difficult time to set aside, in my opinion, some additional reserves in the event that 2022 isn't successful.
And just one additional comment, and then definitely turn it open to other trustees' thoughts. A lot of the feedback that I got after the public forum was, why are you even looking at a facilities master plan given the current environment today? And I think the point that we would like to make to our constituents is that we want and need to have a current and updated educational master plan, technology master plan, and facilities master plan. And we need to decouple, when constituents ask us that question, we need to decouple the need for an FMP, and the work has been done. And if we agree with this work, it's up to each of us to vote thumbs up or thumbs down. But if we think the plan is a good plan, it's okay to vote for and approve this plan, even though it's not a good environment right now and in November to go out and then finance the plan. So I would just suggest, if any of you get that feedback from your constituents, make it clear that the approval of the plan is a separate event from how to finance it. And then I would just like to conclude my comments by complimenting Erica and Mike both on getting to the finish line on this facilities master plan, number one, and really having it well thought out. But number two, once again, Semper Gumby, having to be flexible and recognize, while we've been putting this thing together, the world has turned upside down on us. And
Yep.
Mike coming up with a bridge loan strategy to preserve that valuable $45 million of Prop 51 money from the state so we can at least get the U building done. I really commend you for doing that, and just like you've been doing operationally, having to bob and weave and adjust to what's going on and still make these things work. So I commend you both for the master plan as well as coming up with a financing plan that deals with the current realities. So thank you.
Thank you. He's a rock star.
So I agree. We need to decouple this from the bond. I think the FMP really supports our EMP, and that's really what we've been after. So, to have a strong educational master plan serving our community, and then having the capacity in our facilities to be able to serve, to support that EMP. I think that's what we should, that's more important for us to say. I really do like that, the alternatives that Mike has come up with, although I do agree, and I hear what John has to say. Mm-hmm. I think, I think that there is some, we should think about, whether or not we can, it's better for us not to roll the dice in 2 years if we don't get the master plan or if we don't get the bond. But I think that, I think Mike's recommendation early on to the committee, the FMP committee, that we break the bond up into 2 separate bonds, I think is much more, I think it's something that the community could digest much better than coming out with $1 billion bond, which many districts came out with. I think it makes a lot of sense. And if in 2 years we find that there is not an appetite for even a $300 million bond, I mean, I certainly think that they would approve a $50 million bond, and maybe we do it in more than 2 phases if we have to do it. So that might be something that we can think about.
Yeah, breaking it up into more bite-sized pieces. There's, Mike, you can weigh in on that. There's some dollar figure below which it just doesn't make sense to do these ballot initiatives and bond cost of issuance and all that. And I don't know what the magic number is, but I'm just going to throw out there, it might be 100 or 200 million. You could still go forward, but the overall costs of the ballot initiative and the cost of issuance might start to really add up on a too small of a bond.
Right. We'd have to look at that break even every time we looked at going forward with a bond. So we start with the need, and then we look at what the taxpayers are willing to support, and is there something that works well. Mm-hmm. And I believe right now it's just not the time, but if you look at a Prop 39 max out at $25 per 100,000 of assessed valuation, and our average home is worth $450,000, we're looking at an annual bill around 120 on an average. So and that $25 of a assessed valuation would raise approximately $600 million. So it raises a lot. But if we're looking at $12, that raised 300 million. Yeah. So at some point,
the annual outlay, Mike, at that higher number, at the full max number?
The 25 per 100,000. So of an average home of 450, you're going to be looking at 112, a little less than 120 on the tax bill.
Dollars per year.
So now the feeling is not one more dollar. I'm worried about making my mortgage.
Yeah.
But if the economy's doing better, to ask someone to spend, $100 to $200 per year to support the college, which would be a huge economic stimulus for the community, would be, I think it's a conversation worth having with the constituents.
Trustee Chen Lao.
I agree with Mike on that front, because I do believe that the San Gabriel Valley is an education district, that all of our districts, are very, I think, positive toward education and especially higher education. And if we were able to, leverage the concept of this being an, economic stimulus with jobs and helping small businesses, I do think that we do have a chance there. My daughter is in the San Marino School District, and one of the reasons, I think that the bond failed, it was because it was a $200 million bond for that size of a district. And the parents that came out against it actually suggested lowering the number of the bonds. So they would have been okay maybe with a 75 million or 90 million bond that was similar to La Cañada School District when it passed its bond. So the size of the bond, certainly does matter here. And it would be interesting to see, if we're going to do this in 2 bonds or, 2 phases, what those numbers would be. And certainly if you can send us, Mike, the breakdown of how much each of the phase would be, that would be great to see.
May I say something?
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, please. Trustee Brown.
So this is Belinda, of course. So all that's been said is actually very good in the right climate. Now, I am still going back to the earlier conversation we had regarding the poll of trying to find out who would be in favor of supporting a bond. Normally, like I said, in the right climate, this is fine. But during these days, and I would say I don't see any kind of change for the next 3 to 4 years, I would actually be very insulted for someone to call me and ask me if I would agree to support the college when I'm trying to feed my kids. So I think Linda alluded to, I think it was tax burnout, where people were just tired of paying taxes. Well, it would be the same situation. I think you probably will get a lot of folks very upset for someone even approaching you at this point to try to pay, to add something to your bill. So again, I am in agreement with us moving forward with the Serafian building, because it's quite obvious that we cannot let it go. But when it comes to the bond, I really think we need to just kind of hang loose and see how the economy works. And I really am uncomfortable with paying out money to do another survey to know already the results. That's just my opinion, of course. Thank you.
Superintendent Androgenis.
If the board really does not want us to do a survey right now, we won't do the survey. So we take our direction from you. And obviously we have a contract with the folks and we would just have to go back and figure out how to negotiate that contract. But if you're not comfortable with that, then we won't do it. And I understand all of the reasons that you all have talked about. And we certainly don't know if this is a swoosh recovery, if it's an L recovery, if it's a U recovery. I've learned more recovery modalities than I care to know. But you know, this particular issue is at your direction. And so if your direction is we're comfortable with the COP, we'll figure out what mechanism we want to use, but we really would prefer to not ask the question of the voters in our district, then we won't do that. It's really, it is your decision.
And
I think that's a great idea. Leave them alone.
Yeah, and I think Trustee Brown, what you're saying is we might be perceived to be tone deaf to our community at this point in time. To go out and even dare to ask the question, even if we were just surveying, you know, to see.
And that's fine. You know what? We, like you said, we put together this whole process. We had a whole timeline, and then COVID-19 came along, and you know, the best laid plans of mice and humans. And so, you know, we will just work with the polling company and try to figure out what our strategy is in terms of pausing it and the intervals at which we will go back and at least have dialogue with them. And, you know, again, we take our direction from you.
Let me suggest that we'll get to Tammy and Sandra in just one moment. Let me suggest that Berlinda, that is an important thought, and why don't we all think about that between now and our board meeting, and we can think about it more and give direction at the next board meeting.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Can you clarify for me, what direction are we talking about? Going out with a survey this year?
Yeah. Whether or not it was a good idea to do a survey this summer, which was really,
I don't know. I'm very positive. I think by January the economy will come back if we get this under control. And I would look at.
I think you might be alone in that one, Tony.
I think
you can survey Tony. You could survey Tony.
Yeah.
I just look at the political. I look at the political atmosphere, and I don't want to.
So do we.
Things do not look that bad.
Oh my gosh, Tony, we are not going.
Tony, you're positive.
You know, I'm going to tell you. I'll tell you what I think. I look at politics, and we're not into the depression as we were with Hoover, but I just think this president would be in more dire straits than what he is in if things look horrible.
Oh
but
my God.
I think by 2022 we should think about a bond. You know, I really do.
Okay. Tammy, you were next, and then Sandra.
My question is, I'm going back to John's idea of fencing off those dollars that we're currently using to service debt. And how can we, I think I'm, I guess, opposite Tony right now, because I'm very concerned about this.
I'm very concerned. You have to realize, I'm not just saying things are bright, but I think things by January should look better, you know?
Get them right.
So how could we protect those dollars from the spectrum of feelings of how the economy is going to be in case we have the worst case scenario and 2022 is still not looking good and we need to pay 2 years? So how can we, that's a lot of money that many entities at the college are going to want. They're going to see it sitting on the books. How can it be protected?
Mike, Dr. Bush, and then we'll go.
Let Mike talk. Yeah, I think.
There are a few ways. One is to have the board formally adopt that by this year, this will be part of the budget, and then it's no longer available for negotiations or other purposes. The other thing is to take the amount of money every year and transfer it to our facility capital fund and use the 1.8 million next year for capital projects and the year after for capital projects. And then the third year, have it just go to the COP is a very easy way to do it. The pressure will come up is the rhetoric will be putting buildings before people if we have to make a reduction in force. And those are tough decisions, and Trustee Martin is correct. It takes a lot of resolve to say our capital investment is also important and we're going to move forward with it. So those are the two ways to do it. I would not recommend having it build our reserves or our ending balance in the unrestricted general fund. We have a board policy that kind of outlines that, but we could make a transfer to our capital fund, which is very easy to do. Or we could say, we're going to set aside 900,000 this year, 1.8 million next year. We could come up with a graduated amount, and it'd be a board action, and the board would take direction, give, vote on it. And then that will be the budget direction that will go into the document, and we'll make it part of the budget document.
And then if we don't need that cushion, it's just released.
Then we would, let's say there is a successful election, and in 2023, the staff would move forward and say, these are funds we no longer need that need to be reappropriated now. What is the direction of the board? Obviously, the superintendent will have recommendations on whether it should go into technology, whether it should go into additional staffing, but it would be money available for reappropriation at that time.
Whether it should go into CalPERS, CalSTRS funding.
Right, exactly.
Hopefully not.
And if I can just say, I just want to, say that part of the conversation here too is that this money is going to pay for a building that will serve our students and will be state of the art for our faculty to teach in. It's not going to build the Taj Mahal that is unnecessary on the campus.
Erica's office, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. It's not my office.
And then the last point I wanted to make, although it seems like a big number, it's 1%. It's just 1% of our unrestricted general fund.
And it creates jobs in the local community.
Yeah.
Okay, Tammy is done, then Sandra, you're next.
So my question is that we are for sure going to get that $45 million from the state, right? I mean, that's been signed, sealed, and done. And what is the time frame that we have to spend that money? 4 years, 2 years?
Okay, it's not signed, sealed, and delivered.
Okay.
But it is at risk. And that is the urgency that I feel to start spending the money. The chancellor's office said they put it in next year's budget. So they gave us a few months more. We have been in conversations with the chancellor's office, and they wrote a justification to the Department of Finance. So hopefully the Department of Finance does not want to take the money, but it is not signed, sealed until we start drawing it down. Once we start drawing it down, then it's a done deal. How long do we have? They would like to see it done fairly rapidly. They know how long it takes to construct a building. They're looking at roughly 24 months to construct that building.
So given the budget deficit that the California is going to be in for the next year and probably the following year, would that impact whether or not we're going to continue to be able to draw from that source?
Not the way the state works. First of all, It is a Proposition 51 bond money. They sold a bond to put this, so they've set that money aside. So they're not using it as a general operating. They've taken the 45 million and they've set it aside, and then we can draw down on it. The Department of Financing is looking at recouping any unused grants. So they could, for cash purposes, want to sweep everything up so they have cash to spend. But it's not, I don't want to say it's not like a grant out of the Prop 98 money that's very much at risk. This is different money, but you know, until we start spending that first dollar on construction, soon as they move us from planning to construction, we can start drawing it down, then we're good to go. It's no longer at risk.
Yeah. So I agree. We need to start spending this down. It's part of the chancellor's message. It's been part of the budget message last week. It's going to be the chancellor's message this in the upcoming Board of Governors meeting of the state of the system. So I think that we continue to be at risk if we don't start on this. I absolutely think we need to go forward. And I like the idea then of using the bridge loan to finish up the partnership that we're required to do to get this money. I am a little worried that about any perception that we are holding up cushioning funds in anticipation. Even when we tell this to faculty, you know, when people are in when they're hurting and they feel like, you know, they can't make their mortgage or they can't feed their kids, any perception that we are holding back a cushion of funds for any amount of time, I think puts us in it's bad optics. So I think we need to, it's one of the reasons why I think John's recommendation may make some sense for us to really look at.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the proper way to handle that is to have that be part of the bridge loan, COP proposal, Erica and Mike, that you submit to us, that this money, you can describe it as necessary, but that just comes hand in hand with the financing. If we're not going to do the financing unless we do that, and just leave it at that. That's a necessary part of the financing.
And the other thing too is, in difficult times, and I've been involved in building projects in difficult financial times, the reality is that the $45 million we get from the state can't be used for anything other than building. Like it does not change the facts of what the $45 million is. It can't pay for humans. It only can pay to build a building.
Yeah.
So in the plan that we're going to approve, the facilities master plan, is the cost going to accompany the plan, or we're not going to show the cost in the plan that's going to be approved by the board?
The cost is not the master plan.
No, because the costs will change.
Right. But the original direction I was given in the charge by the superintendent was to develop a facility master plan, to determine the cost of implementing that master plan, and then determine the political climate for a bond. Those were the three things that I was supposed to be able to present to the board, and I'm a month late on the facilities plan and the cost. And then we were also hoping at this time to present the survey results, so then the board could deliberate on whether or not you want, by August 1st, you'd have to make a decision to put something on the November ballot. Then we ran into COVID-19. So my direction has slightly changed. She let me slide for a whole month on presenting the facility master plan. The cost is available, but that's a separate from the plan.
Yeah, it's not.
I've already shared it with the facilities committee. No reason not to share it with the entire board. I don't think it has to be an agenda item. It could just be, I'll give it to Dr. Jonas and she could distributed. It's pretty straightforward costing document of every phase.
Trustee Sarkisian.
I just want to say the fact that Dr. Bush can make all of this like digestible to me with my like only economics education in high school, he deserves like a 10-year position at PCC.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to,
Well, that's good since Erica will be with us till 2030. That makes
yeah.
To get an office done.
That's hilarious.
The trustees are slowly laying the bricks for the next.
Yeah, I know, I can see that. They're just, what they're saying is they're going to take me out in a pine box, is what they're saying.
No, I know we're almost done here, but Alex, I have a text message that I got from somebody that's watching on YouTube, and it says that they're no longer accepting public comment. Is that the case?
Yeah, public comment ended at the beginning of the meeting. And it's a little different than when we did the town hall, because that wasn't a noticed meeting.
Understood.
But this is a noticed meeting, and you took your public comment at the beginning of the meeting. So it was never arranged or assumed that we would be taking public comment throughout the meeting. Even though it's a study session, it's your study session.
Okay, Alex.
I do want to say I have put my email address in the chat box of the YouTube stream so people can email me if they have questions they want followed up on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, we're always happy to follow up on questions, but in engaging people is, you didn't design this for that.
So we've run long here, but we've covered a lot of really important business. Dr. Bush, Dr. Androgenis, do we have more to cover, or have we covered everything?
No, I think we've covered everything. The FMP will be on the board agenda next week for your approval. And then, Mike, do you want to say something about the whole COP? What's the timing of having that discussion?
Soon as we get notification that we're moving into the construction phase, we will then bid the demolition, which you've already authorized. So when we award the demolition bid, we'll also, whatever meeting that is, we'll be finalizing our conversation on the COP. And I'll invite bond counsel to the meeting, and probably Mr. Wright again to work out, you know, what the board legally needs to do. Before then, we'll have conversations with the audit and budget committee on the best structure, because there's technicalities on capitalizing interest versus the call period and all different puts and takes, but we'll get the best one designed for the district. And so whatever the state starts the process, we'll then kick off the COP.
Great. And again, thank you. In addition though, but thank you for having a strategy to start demolition as quickly as possible so we can lock in and secure that $45 million of Prop 51 money. That's super important. So thank you for that too.
So Erica, would it be possible to give us some talking points, you know, about how we can talk about the building and how we're paying for the building at some point in time, so that we're all
point in time, once you all have done a final decision, then we could do that, and they could be talking points that are on our website, and so you would have them, plus they would be available to other people.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if we're all done here, if we have no further questions, I'm going to thank everybody for staying late, and I'm going to adjourn the meeting. So thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Bush, in particular. Yeah.
Dr. Bush.
Yes.
On this